Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Frickin' Rec Room podcast with Brian Rector. And today we've got a special guest, and I know I say this every week because it's true. Each of the guests that we've are had for a reason, appointed to be able to have a show and talk about what is going on in their sport, in their career, in their life. And folks, today, all of those parts will be interwoven into this episode. It's the Rec Room episode 36, live, not really, it's on tape recording, from Redmond, Oregon, and across the country in Lawrence, South Carolina, is Miss Anna Hall. How are you doing, first off?
Good, and good intro. That was really good.
Well, it's great to hear you and great to see you. I think after knowing that, because like we were talking about off camera, I've been new to the sport of volleyball. I'm just beginning to pick the thing up, so I'm learning as I go. And I think what was really cool was a couple weeks ago, and I know everyone listening to this will understand, that I was able to interview your head coach at Louisville, or I guess assistant at that point.
Yeah.
New head coach, but Dan Meskey with the Cardinals, you being a graduate of the University of Louisville and having had the experiences of being an alternate at the Paris Games and being a member of the League One Madison team, as well as having played professional for 3 total seasons now. Like, you've had so many different experiences in the sport, and I want to get going here and dive really deep into it. Like, when did you know, Anna, that volleyball would be a way that you could pave a path and start a career and kind of get involved in the thing at a higher level? When did that all come into your idea of scope?
I started in middle school, but I think people watch volleyball a lot earlier now, like with social media and everything. But until high school, I didn't watch college volleyball. And when I started to get recruited, I got a letter from Purdue to come to one of their camps, which is a really good school to go to, a really good volleyball school. And I remember telling my dad, like, I didn't want to go because they wore short sleeve jerseys, and because I'd just seen pictures. And so to me, that kind of just shows I didn't know anything. And so it's good that people watch a lot more volleyball now. But as far as knowing that I could make a career out of it, I don't even think it was until my sophomore year in college that I even considered professional volleyball. It's difficult to watch until now that it's in the States.
Right.
Like when I was in Turkey, my family had to watch on some measly TV link on YouTube. It was just, I don't know, it's difficult. And so I think now it's easier for people to watch. But yeah, I didn't know that I could make a career of it until kind of late.
And then I think, another point to your college career was having started at Auburn, right? And then moved over to Louisville. What was that process like of figuring out what the right fit is and ending at a place like Louisville that has truly become one of the powers in the sport? And I think it's positioned really well to, continue to be successful on a national stage.
Yeah. We certainly hope so, because I feel like each year they're just getting closer to a national championship, and my gosh, I hope this year is the year. But I really just wanted to go to a school that would make the tournament, because in my mind the tournament was like the pinnacle of volleyball. I didn't know anything about USA or pro, and the tournament, I was like, if we could just make it to the first round, if I could just be somewhere that got to play and watch your name show up on the bracket, that would be the best. So that was my only ambition. And Louisville reached out to them. I think they were my first email, and Danny Busboom Kelly was the head coach at the time, and she said that they did not need me to be good, but that if I wanted to be there, they would want me to come, that I could help. And that appealed to me for some reason. I was like, they don't need me. They're already good. I could just be a part of it. And certainly was. It was great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what I want to do from that perspective that you just mentioned, which is playing a role and being a part of it. Like, what is your attitude and orientation towards being a star of a team versus playing that role? And this is where I want to tie in one of the central subjects of today's podcast, which is the faith that you have.
Mm-hmm.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, this might be part of that. So what is that in terms of defining your role on a team? How do you go about doing that?
Dan was a huge part of that because from the get-go, while I was at Auburn, we didn't have really position groups or position coaches. I felt like I worked with all coaches equally. But at Louisville, Dan was specifically the middles position coach. And so we would all go up for video in his office, couch, 2 comfy chairs, and like watch men's volleyball or watch fun players to study. And I felt like he really created this like tight-knit position. Like, I don't know, we really valued the middles of the team. And I feel like ever since graduating, I've really tried to foster that relationship with my fellow position group members. I don't know how to phrase that. And that's something that's really important to me. And I think that especially being involved with, like, not this summer, but in the past Team USA, knowing that you're competing with these people and you're going to get cut or you're going to make the team, or you're going to get cut, but you're going to have to stay in case people get hurt. It just makes things, I guess that sounds a little selfish. It does make things easier when you have a good relationship with people like that. So while it is hard to be happy for someone who makes a roster ahead of you, it's, I don't know, you can be happy and you can be disappointed at the same time. And I do think faith plays a huge part in that. And I think in my worst volleyball moments, I kind of can even use it as a cop-out, like, well, it's just not meant to be, and kind of like to make myself feel a little bit better. But I think after a couple great summers and bad summers and getting cut and then getting to be an alternate, which was really cool, I feel like I've come to realize, like, I do have a gift, and like I believe God does want us to be our best and try our best. And so I try not to fall into this like pity party of, oh, I just need to be a good teammate. I need to be a good teammate, and I also need to be my best. But I do think that without my faith, I would feel a little purposeless and things would hurt a lot more, and volleyball would have way more of a grip on me outside of the court than it does currently.
Absolutely. And I really like the way that you had laid that answer out, because, you know, over the course of a career, it is surely going to happen that there are highs and lows, and there are challenging aspects to navigating the cyclical nature of being an athlete that would be really hard to navigate without something like the foundation of your faith to lean on. But what I have to know is, over the course of your career, is there any time where you've had a really difficult personal question to answer? And if there has been, how did you navigate getting through that? And what was your approach to go and find the answer to the test that you were being bestowed with?
Yeah. After it was my first season in Italy, and our coach, it was my first full season. So I'd done a half season in Turkey, and I thought that was hard. But at the time, I didn't know it. I had the best coach I could have had. He was really good to me. And then I went to Italy for my first full season, and our coach was crazy. And I feel like everyone who goes over for their first season is going to say that. But really, like, it was the most bizarre experience I've ever had. Like, we were playing so much, and I don't know if maybe now I wouldn't think it was that bad, but at the time I remember approaching him and being like, can we just take down our jump count and practice? And to him, I was probably like this cocky, like fresh out of college American that doesn't want to work hard. But like, we practice so much, and I'm like, I can't believe I asked him that. But he was like, who are you? Who do you think you are that you can come to me like this? You're just an American who graduated. You don't want to work for me. Everyone wants to make the Olympics. Everyone has these ambitions. Like, what you can go home if you want. You can go home right now. You don't have to practice anymore. And I was, of course, like crying. I was like, and he was a mean coach. and that wasn't that bad. But I remember calling Dan, and he was like, "Are you really gonna let this one person's words like derail your professional career? Like come on, Stevie." And so after that season, I went to back to USA. I'd had a good first summer, and this was my second. And I think for most people, I think the second summer is the hardest because now you kind of have expectations. It's not all shiny and new. And there's more pressure. And it was just like the worst summer. I didn't feel like myself. I didn't enjoy playing. I played poorly when I did play. And I think it was just having rolled in from a tough Italian season to that. And I wasn't prepared. But at the time, I wanted to quit. And I remember talking to people left and right, just itching for someone to tell me, like, that's the right thing to do. And no one would. Talk to Dan a lot, and he would not tell me, yes, you should quit. You should talk to Karch, and you should just be done this summer. But I think that summer, I struggled a lot with, like who am I? Am I a good player anymore? And that was the worst I had ever felt about myself. Like, we had to do drug testing, and you have to go pee in a cup, and the drug testing lady has to watch you. And I remember it was after practice one day, and I was like, I just like had a breakdown, and I was like hyperventilating, and you're on the toilet in front of this stranger, and I was like, this is the worst. But yeah, I think that summer, and like, what kind of player am I supposed to be? Am I supposed to be playing? And then sure enough, the next season was good. So I feel like you said, it's just a cycle.
And I think, like, thank you, by the way, for sharing that story and being vulnerable. This, though, matches something that I had heard about you, which was that you're one of the most authentic people that Dan has ever seen, in the way of asking questions, being inquisitive, being willing to speak on what's going on. I was wondering, Anna, like, where does that kind of, I'm hesitant to say ideology, but where does that initiative come from to be the one who's bringing the culture together, asking the questions, and being willing to shake things up a little bit to bring people together?
Thank you. And thank you to Dan. Maybe like the positive side of that is maybe it comes from, I've had some really great coaches at Auburn, Alex Wilharm. We just watched a ton of video, and I just enjoyed learning, and I had never realized how much you could learn about volleyball. I thought, oh, you just practice. I had never watched to learn. And then being with Dan and watching and learning, and we would just talk about different tactic and different things like that. That just made me realize, oh, it is fun to like ask questions and learn. And I think that just carries on to off the court. And I like to get to know people. And then I guess like a bad side of it is I don't like to speak up about things. I don't like to be in charge. And I've found that you can kind of get some of that stuff done by asking questions. So maybe sometimes instead of saying what needs to be said, I probably beat around the bush and ask too much. But yeah. Sorry if that's loud.
No worries.
Yeah, I like to get to know people too. So volleyball and people-wise, it just kind of comes to me naturally.
Absolutely. Is there anybody who has received a question from you, heard it, and been like, oh, I don't want to answer that. We can't talk about that. Like,
no, and like, I think you had written down like faith-wise, and no, I always build it up in my head, like, you can't talk about certain things or you don't want to offend people, but I feel like most people want to explain their side of things too and are curious, and especially if you go into something from a place of curiosity, most people are really receptive to that. And I've just played with so many different kinds of people, having played in Turkey and Italy, and then with USA you get to play with people you've watched on TV forever, like Haley Washington, one of my favorite people I've gotten to know, Jordan Larson, just a lot of different experiences to pull from, and people are really willing to share. I think people like to share. So
I gotta ask, like, operating in all of these different teams, even across the world, there are unique opportunities to share about who you are and share the gospel and kind of like build your faith with these other folks. Have you been able to have spiritual conversations and get to know their heart in these different buckets of players and locations that you've played in?
Yeah, Turkey was probably the coolest experience I've had with that, because Islam is the
Hmm.
biggest or most I don't know what you'd say. Most people are Muslim, practicing
Sure.
Muslims, practicing Islam. And they like, oh man, I don't even remember what it was called. The call to prayer. It's 3 times a day. And the first time I heard it, I was like, we're being invaded. Like I woke up, it was like dark, and it was my first night there, and it's just this blaring, like, it's not opera. I don't know what it sounded like, but I was scared. And then I just got used to it. But it was cool to hear my teammates talk about that. And I believe it's Ramadan, when they fast for a very long time, only eat at certain times. And it made me want to be more devout in my faith, because I was like, these people can bow down and like laying on the sidewalk when the call to prayer happens. Like, they're that bold, and I'm like shy to pray at meals with my friends still. Like, it was a little bizarre to me. It was kind of eye-opening. And then just asking teammates what they believe. And it's been good for me, because they'll be like, well, how can you believe that if this and this happen? And so it's kind of made me question things a little bit, and not in like a I don't believe way, but test my faith a little bit, grow it. And I read Case for Christ. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Lee Strobel.
Yeah, I think it's a movie too. Maybe I watched it a while ago, but the book was really good. And I would have never picked up something like that if a teammate hadn't made me question things. So yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just think, like, that's what it takes, right? Is being refined in our faith by the fire of trials and tribulations and of folks who are asking, right? And I think you touched on something very important, which is that we must respond in a place of humbleness and approaching things like the Word and other folks who have these wisdoms, who can answer these things, so that we can learn and relay the thing forward, right? So I love that process. I really do. You know, what I want to ask you about is, like, looking at the scope of volleyball across the world. Like, what has been your impression of the growth that we've seen in the sport in recent years, particularly in this country? But then additionally, like, do you have a perspective and an attitude around the growth of women's sports as a whole that we've seen the last couple of years?
I think it's been really cool to see volleyball grow, and especially the national championship being in Louisville this past season. It was sweet, because I never played a single game in the KFC Yum Center. I was always in their smaller arena, L&N, Federal Credit Union Arena. And to see them like pack out the Yum Center was crazy. And I know that's happening to a lot of colleges all over the place. And then League One and PVF, AU Pro does a really good job promoting. It's just been really special to see. And I really want us all to combine. I think that would just make things simpler, because the average person does not understand PVF versus AU Pro. They're like, wait, but that one's only 2 months, and then this one's a different league than the LOVB. That's what people still say. And it does look like LOVB, but it's not. And so, yeah, I'm happy that it's happening now. And I think if it happened sooner, a lot more girls would still be playing, rather than going overseas and then quitting because they didn't like it. And then women's sports as a whole, I'm really bad at keeping up with other sports, but I do. I follow Ilona Meyer. I met her in Paris. I have a selfie.
Wow.
My dad watches Caitlin Clark's games. But yes, it's cool to see a lot more people caring about a lot of different sports.
Yes, certainly. And I think too, like, something that's unique to your journey at this point is getting ready to welcome a child into your family. Congratulations, A, on that. And B, like, what throughout this process of working on health and like staying in the gym and getting ready, like, what are some of the things that you've learned, and what are you most excited for the upcoming chapter?
I have been surprised at how much I've That doesn't sound bad. I've been surprised at how much I care about him and like love him
Mm.
already.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the season, I think we found out on January 2nd that I was pregnant, and we were really, really excited, and we had planned for that, and planned, and then we're like grateful that it happened. And I remember like I was still diving and everything. I was like, I don't want this to like get in the way of volleyball, but I also like don't want him to get hurt or it. I didn't know what it was at the time. And then I think we went in for an ultrasound at like 16 weeks or 20 weeks, and he was moving. And to see him moving on the screen, I was like, holy crap. Like, I cannot dive anymore. Like, I can't. That was kind of eye opening for me. I was like, wow, like, I don't want to hurt this little guy. And so that was cool to feel my mindset kind of change. And one of my setters on my team, Danica Markovic, she's Serbian. She had her son, and this was her first season back. And she was like, why you stress about volleyball? This is not important. Volleyball is a stupid game. You have life inside you. And I was like, yeah. And then the longer it went on, I was like, yeah, I do. This isn't the most important thing. Like, he is the most important thing right now. So that's been cool to see that mindset change in me. I am nervous to return. I feel like things are easy still. They're getting harder, but it's still going really smoothly. I'm lifting. I feel good. When I jump and stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting any air. We're starting to jump even less than I was because it's starting to pull a lot in my abs as he grows. But I do get nervous to return because I know it's not going to look like where I left off. And it's going to be like a whole progression. And there's no telling what that will look like. So.
Yeah. No, and I think like too, I'm so curious to hear like what has it been like to be reliant and lean on your faith throughout this process and the understanding of the changing perspective and being able to bring up a young man in the faith as well? Like, how heavy has that been on your heart and your husband's as well?
Yeah. At first, like, people don't talk about how common miscarriage is, and like I was so scared. It's almost ridiculous how fast you jump from like joyful to like fearful of losing something in an instant. And do you know the pastor Jonathan Precluda? A lot of people. Yeah, I follow him on Instagram, and he had written something about like you can't be so fearful of losing blessings that you don't like thank God for them and appreciate them. And I remember I was like prayed every day. I was like, God, please keep him safe, or please keep the baby safe. Like, I'm so scared to lose. I'm worried what I'm doing is going to hurt him. And I just kind of learning to, like, you can't control anything as much as you think you can. And thankfully he's still growing, and his heart's beating strong. And I'm like 29 weeks this week, or 30, one of the two. It's the third trimester. So at the end, but we just prayed for him a lot. And I know a lot of people don't want to share about pregnancies early for fear of loss. And then you have to go back and tell all these people. But I was texting friends left and right. I was like, please pray. Like, I want you to know, because I want you to pray for it. I want you to pray that it is okay in there. And my mom was like, well, welcome to motherhood. Like, no matter what happens, I was like, once I hear his heartbeat, then I'll stop worrying. And then I heard his heartbeat, and then I was like, I want to hear it again. And my mom was like, this is motherhood. Like, no matter what happens, you're always going to be concerned. So it's been cool to see that in me a little bit, although I wish I wouldn't worry. So.
I see. One of those things, though, I mean, it's hard not to, right? It's hard not to.
Yeah. For sure.
Absolutely. Hey, I gotta ask you, before we get going here, like, how do you feel about doing a rapid fire segment?
Let's do it.
Cool. So this here is rolling loud on the rec room. Many of y'all have heard this thing over and over and over. But Anna, before we go here, I just have a few more questions for you. And I'll start by saying, and this one feels pretty simple, actually, given the conversation we just had. But in order for your 2025 to be complete, what has to happen?
I would love to have a really smooth, minimal medical intervention birth. I know anything can happen out of your control, but I would just love for that to go smooth. And yeah, we're going to name him Louis, I believe. So smooth birth and bring Louis home that night or that day or whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A name drop right there. I got to say, I was not expecting that.
After Louisville, yeah.
I was going to, wow, oh my gosh. I was going to ask you after we got off, like, what are you thinking? But, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing, amazing, amazing. If you could have a billboard in either, let's say, your hometown, but maybe Louisville too, like, what would it say? You had 1 week to put up a message on this billboard. What would it say?
Right now, it would be something about volleyball lessons. Please contact me, because I feel all I do is lift, and I'm trying to work some camps together, but I need to be useful.
So, does that mean a future in coaching? What are you telling me right now? Are you preparing for it?
Sometimes I consider it, but college is changing fast, so I don't know.
And then, I got to ask you this. Like, if anybody could ask you a question more, if there was something that you would like to speak on more often than you get to, what would that be and why?
I think people should ask about, like, failure a little bit more and watch that happen, and then I would be, like, offended in the moment, like, why would they bring that up? But I think I don't know, the stories I've learned the most from are not the super successful ones. I like a good comeback story, and everyone fails, so I enjoy hearing about other people's and how they get through that.
So if you had to give one piece of advice to a young athlete coming up who has grown used to failure and of not being able to climb through it, what would that piece of advice be?
For me, it would probably be that no one is thinking about you as much as you think about yourself. And when I have been playing my worst volleyball, like, often I'm like, oh, like, my setter's frustrated with me, like the other middles are like judging my performance, and it's just a whole lot going on up here, and everyone else is worried about themselves. And if you can just stay in your lane and, like, encourage other people as well, it makes things a lot easier.
And then, Mrs. Hall, the last thing I have for you is, if you could play volleyball anywhere in the world, where would you play? Before you answer, I'll tell you that Dan said an aircraft carrier. So that's how wild we can get with the thing. He said, if I can control the wind, I want to go on an aircraft carrier.
Why? I'm not gonna make any money that way. I would go to Japan, which I know is, like, feasible and possible one day, but with a baby, I'm like, I don't want to fly him all the way to Japan, and then does Duncan want to go live in Japan? But I love Japan. I love sushi. I love the people in Japan, and it's so clean. I think I would get a lot better playing over there, and so ideally one day, a dream would be to play in Japan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Anna Hall, thank you so much for appearing on the Rec Room with Brian Rector. I appreciate your time. It's meant a lot to be able to sit here with you and to hear about what's going on at current. And is there, lastly, anybody else that you'd like to shout out and give thanks for?
I'll say thanks to my parents and my in-laws right now, that we're living with them and back and forth, and it will be this way with a newborn, so I'm sure they do a lot for us. But thank you, and that was really concise. You're on it. I don't feel like you waste any time. That was really good.
Well, thank you so much, and we're trying over here. But that's been the Rec Room episode 36 with Brian Rector, and today our guest, Anna Stevenson Hall.